It was a Tuesday, October 14th. I remember the date because I had just paid my truck insurance that morning, and I was annoyed about the premium hike. It's funny what your brain holds on to when the world ends. You don't think about your legacy or your loved ones immediately. You think about the $60 surcharge on a Toyota Tacoma that you're never going to drive again. I worked, security for Distinct Logistics. It's a massive shipping container yard about 40 miles south of Seattle. If you've never been in a shipping yard at night, it's a specific kind of lonely. It's an industrial canyon. Rows and rows of steel containers stacked 4 or 5 high, creating these long, perfect alleyways of rusted red and blue metal. My shift was the graveyard, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was a job for people who didn't mind talking to themselves. My routine was simple. I sat in the main guard shack, this little fiberglass box with a space heater and a bank of monitors, and once every hour I did a patrol in the company pickup truck. Drive the perimeter, check the gate locks, make sure no kids were tagging the containers, go back to the shack, drink terrible coffee. Rinse. Repeat. That night, the weather was typical for the Northwest. A heavy, wet mist that wasn't quite rain, just enough to make the asphalt slick. The kind of damp cold that gets under your collar. It was 2:45 a.m. I was midway through my third patrol. I had the truck window rolled down because the heater was making me drowsy, and I liked the smell of the wet pine and diesel. The yard was lit up by these massive sodium vapor floodlights mounted on 100-foot poles. They buzzed. That was the soundtrack of my life back then. That low, electrical hum. Zzzzzzzzzzzt. It was so constant you stopped hearing it until it was gone. The light they cast was that sickly, industrial orange. It washed everything out, made the puddles look like oil. I was driving down aisle 4, the reefer row, where the refrigerated containers hummed with their own generators, when the radio in the truck crackled. Not a voice. Just static. A sharp, rhythmic pop-pop-pop of interference. I reached over and turned the radio off. But the popping didn't stop. It was coming from the truck's dashboard speakers, even with the power cut. Then the truck engine sputtered. It didn't stall, exactly. It felt like it was struggling to breathe. The RPMs dropped, the headlights dimmed to a dirty yellow, and then flared back up. Alternator, I muttered to myself. I remember saying it out loud. Piece of junk alternator. I tapped the gas, trying to rev it, but the pedal felt mushy. And that's when the sound changed. The hum of the floodlights, that constant zzzzzzzt, pitch shifted. It went from a low buzz to a high, screaming whine. It was loud enough that I covered my ears. It sounded like 1,000 mosquitoes swarming inside my head. And then, silence. Absolute, crushing silence. Every single floodlight in the yard died at the exact same instant. Now, I've been through power outages before. In a place that big, usually, the lights flicker and die in sections, or the backup generators kick in with a loud thrum and a puff of diesel smoke. This wasn't that. This was instant. 1 second, I was in an orange-lit canyon. The next, I was floating in a void. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded on the wet asphalt and came to a halt. The headlights were still on, but, and this is the part that took my brain a long time to process, they weren't reaching the containers. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my heart doing that slow, heavy thumping against my ribs. I stared through the windshield. Normally, truck high beams cut a cone of light maybe 200-300 feet down a dark aisle. You see the rain slashing through the beams. You see the gravel, the reflection of the steel walls. But my headlights looked stunted. They were bright at the source, blindingly bright where the bulbs were, but the light just stopped about 10 feet in front of the bumper. It didn't fade out. It didn't taper. It looked like the light was hitting a wall of black velvet and simply ceasing to exist. "What the hell?" I whispered. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I was having a stroke, a detached retina or something. I blinked hard, shaking my head. I looked down at the dashboard. The green glow of the instrument panel was there, but it looked dim, like there was smoke in the cab. But the air was clear. I reached for the door handle. My instinct was to get out, check the lights. Stupid instinct. I pushed the door open. The interior dome light came on, but it barely illuminated my lap. It was like the air itself had become thick, like trying to see through muddy water. I stepped out into the damp air. My boots crunched on the gravel. That sound, the crunch, was the only thing that convinced me I was still in reality. It was so quiet. The reefer units, the refrigerated containers that usually hummed 24/7, they were silent. The silence was heavy. It pressed against my eardrums. I walked to the front of the truck. I put my hand out toward the headlight. The beam was hot against my palm. I could see my hand clearly when it was right in front of the lens. But when I took 3 steps back, the truck disappeared. I'm not being poetic. I mean, I took 3 steps backward into the dark, and the truck, with its high beams on, vanished. No glow, no glare, just black. I froze. The disorientation was violent. I spun around, waving my arms, trying to find anything. "Hello," I called out. My voice didn't echo. In a canyon of steel containers, a shout should bounce. "Hello, hello, hello." But the sound died as fast as the light. It felt flat, muffled, like I was shouting inside a closet full of winter coats. I fumbled for the tactical flashlight on my belt. A mag light. Heavy. LED. Reliable. I ripped it free and thumbed the switch. Click. The beam flared. A crisp, white circle of light. But it only reached the ground by my boots. When I aimed it forward, into the darkness, it created a cone that was maybe 6 feet long, and at the end of that 6 feet, the light didn't fade. It shattered. It looked like the beam was fraying at the edges, dissolving into the dark like sugar in hot coffee. I swung the light left. Nothing. I swung it right. Nothing. I knew, intellectually, that there was a 40-foot wall of steel shipping containers 5 feet to my right. I knew it. I had parked next to it. But I couldn't see it. I shuffled to the right, hand outstretched, maglite shaking in my grip. 1 step. 2 steps. My fingertips brushed cold, wet, corrugated metal. I gasped, pulling my hand back like I'd been burned. The container was there. It was right there. But I had to be touching it to see it. I pressed the flashlight lens almost against the red paint. The circle of light showed me the rust spots, the rivets, the serial number, Maersk 409. But if I pulled the light back a foot, the metal disappeared again. I leaned my back against the container. It was the only solid thing in the universe. My breath was coming in short, sharp hitches. Radio, I thought. Call the dispatch. Call the gate. I grabbed the walkie-talkie clipped to my shoulder. I held down the button. Base, this is Elias in Unit 4. We have a total power failure in the yard, and something is wrong with the visibility. Over. I released the button. I waited for the squawk of the dispatcher, old heavy-set Jerry, who sat in the main office 3 miles away. Silence. Base, do you copy? Jerry. The lights are out. My truck lights aren't working right. Over. Nothing. Not even static. The radio felt dead in my hand. The little red light that indicated transmission was glowing, but it looked weak, like a dying ember. I stood there, pressed against the cold steel, surrounded by a darkness so complete it felt like a liquid. And that's when I realized the temperature was dropping. It had been a chilly 45 degrees when I started the patrol. Now I could feel the cold seeping through my uniform jacket, biting into my skin. It wasn't a wind chill. It was a stillness chill. The kind of cold you feel when you open a chest freezer. I needed to get back to the guard shack. The shack had a landline. It had heavy-duty emergency lanterns. It had walls. I tried to orient myself. I was in aisle 4. The guard shack was at the head of the yard, maybe a quarter-mile north. A quarter-mile. In daylight, that's a 5-minute walk. In this, it felt like an ocean crossing. I looked back toward where the truck should be. I couldn't see it, but I could hear the engine making a low, struggling chug. Chug, chug, chug. I followed the sound. I walked with my hands out, swimming through the black. My shins hit the bumper. I scrambled back into the driver's seat and slammed the door. Inside the cab, it felt slightly safer, even if I couldn't see the passenger seat. I put the truck in reverse. I was going to back out of the aisle. I wasn't going to drive forward into a darkness that ate my headlights. I twisted in the seat to look out the rear window. Nothing. Just black. I eased off the brake. The truck rolled backward. I steered by memory, terrified that I was going to scrape the sides of the containers. I moved at a crawl. 1 mile per hour. Thump. The back tire hit a pothole I knew was there. Good. I was still on the path. I drove like that for what felt like an hour, but was probably 10 minutes, reversing blindly through a void. My eyes were straining so hard they watered. I was looking for the sky. There should be city glow. Seattle is north, Tacoma is south. Even on cloudy nights, the clouds glow purple-gray from the light pollution. I stopped the truck and leaned forward, looking up through the windshield. There was nothing. No gray. No purple. No moon. No stars. Just a ceiling of matte black. It was as if someone had poured concrete over the atmosphere. I finally reached the end of the aisle. I knew it because the texture of the ground changed from gravel to paved asphalt. This was the main access road. I put the truck in park. I wasn't going to drive anymore. It was too dangerous. If I veered off the road, I could roll into a drainage ditch. The guard shack was maybe 200 yards to my left. I could walk it. I could feel the pavement edge with my feet. I got out again. I zipped my jacket up to my chin. The cold was bitter now. I clicked my mag light back on. The beam was pitiful, a tiny saber of light fighting a losing war. I started walking. I kept my left foot on the grass verge, my right foot on the pavement. That was my guide. Left foot grass. Right foot road. Left foot grass. Right foot road. I focused on the rhythm. I tried not to think about what was happening. Just get to the shack. Get to Jerry. That's when I heard the first sound that didn't belong to me. I stopped. The silence of the yard had been total. But now, somewhere to my right, out in the open pavement area, there was a sound. Scrape. It was wet. Heavy. Like someone dragging a soaked sleeping bag across concrete. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. I swung my light toward the sound. The beam cut 6 feet into the dark and stopped. It revealed nothing but wet asphalt and rain mist. "Who's out there?" I yelled. The sound stopped immediately. My heart hammered against my throat. "I'm security. Identify yourself." Silence. Then, a new sound. Click, click, click. Fast. Like hard fingernails tapping on stone. Or claws on pavement. It was closer than the scraping. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. I abandoned the grass road method. I just sprinted in the direction I knew the shack was. I ran blindly into the wall of ink. It was terrifying. I couldn't see if I was about to run into a parked semi-truck or a fence. I just ran with my hands up to protect my face. My boots pounded the pavement. Behind me, the skittering sound sped up. Click, 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 click. It wasn't one set of footsteps. It sounded like many. Too many legs. I saw a faint, dull glow ahead. The guard shack. The shack had an exterior emergency light, a red strobe that was supposed to trigger when power was lost. It was flashing, but the light was pathetic. It barely lit the door frame. But it was a beacon. I lunged for it. I hit the door handle so hard I bruised my hip. It was locked. "Jerry!" I screamed, pounding on the fiberglass. "Jerry, open the damn door." I fumbled for my keys. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped them. Clatter. They hit the ground by my feet. I dropped to my knees, frantically sweeping the wet pavement with my hands. Behind me, the clicking stopped. I froze on my knees. I could feel something standing there, just outside the radius of my flashlight. I could hear breathing. It wasn't human breathing. It was wet, ruttling, like air moving through a tube full of fluid. It was close, maybe 5 feet away. If I turned my head, I still wouldn't see it because of the darkness, but I could feel the displacement of the air. It smelled like copper, like old pennies and ozone. My fingers brushed the keys. I grabbed them. I didn't look back. I jammed the key into the lock, twisted, and threw myself inside the shack, slamming the door and throwing the deadbolt. I collapsed on the linoleum floor, gasping, staring at the door. The guard shack was small, maybe 8 by 8 feet. The emergency lighting inside was battery-operated, dim LED strips on the ceiling. They cast a ghostly blue pallor over everything. "Jerry!" I wheezed. I looked at the desk. Jerry's coffee mug was there, steaming slightly. His chair was pushed back. But Jerry wasn't there. The monitors on the wall, the ones that showed the camera feeds from the yard, they were all on, but they were all showing the same thing. Black. Except for camera 4. I pulled myself up and leaned close to the monitor. Camera 4 was the thermal camera. It was designed to pick up heat signatures for fire prevention. The screen was grainy, swimming in gray and white static. It showed the view of the main gate, where I had just come from. In the center of the screen, standing right where I had dropped my keys, was a shape. It was white-hot on the thermal display. But the shape. It wasn't a person. It was too tall. Its limbs were too long, spindly, jointed in the wrong places. It looked like a stick figure drawn by a trembling hand. And as I watched, the thermal image turned its head. It looked up at the camera, and then the monitor flickered and went black. I backed away until I hit the far wall. I slid down to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I looked at the landline phone on the desk. The cord had been ripped out of the wall. I checked my watch. 3:08 a.m. The darkness had been here for 23 minutes. I sat there in the blue gloom of the emergency lights, listening. Outside the thin fiberglass walls, the skittering started again. It moved around the shack, testing the corners, feeling the walls. Scrape, click, scrape. Then a soft thud against the door, like a heavy body leaning against it. I held my breath. The door handle jiggled, just a little. I grabbed the heavy metal flashlight and held it like a club. I waited, but the door held. The sound moved away, fading into the impossible blackness. I was alone. The lights were gone. The radio was dead, and the world had shrunk to the size of an 8x8 box. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. 12% battery. No signal. Emergency calls only. I opened the voice recorder app. I don't know why. Maybe just to hear a human voice. I hit record. "My name is Elias," I whispered. "And I think the sun isn't coming back." I mentioned the mirror. In the guard shack, there was this cheap, plastic-framed mirror mounted on the back of the door. Just a rectangle of glass for checking your uniform tie or making sure you didn't have spinach in your teeth before a shift change. After I locked the door and slid to the floor, I sat there for a long time, just breathing, trying to get my heart rate under 200. The blue LED emergency strips on the ceiling were humming, a high, sickly whine. They cast just enough light to see the room, but the corners of the shack were swallowed. Even in a room that small, 8 feet by 8 feet, the light struggled to reach the edges. It pooled in the center like water. I stood up, my knees cracking, and I turned to check the deadbolt again. That's when I caught my reflection. Or what should have been my reflection. The mirror was only 3 feet away from my face. In the old world, the world from an hour ago, light travels at, 186,000 miles per second. You look in a mirror, you see yourself instantly. But here, in this new physics, I looked into the glass, and I saw a delay. It was slight, a fraction of a second. I blinked, and the reflection blinked after me. I raised my hand, and the hand in the glass dragged upward a moment later, leaving a faint, blurry trail behind it, like a video buffering on a bad connection. And the quality of the image. It was grey, desaturated. It looked like I was viewing myself through a thick layer of dirty ice. I leaned closer. The closer I got to the glass, the clearer the image became. When my nose was almost touching the mirror, my eyes looked normal, brown, bloodshot, terrified. But when I leaned back just 2 feet, I faded. My features blurred into a smear of grey static. That's when I understood the radius. It wasn't just that the lights were dim. It was that the air itself had become resistant. It was eating the information. It was eating the light. If I stood 6 feet away from you, I wouldn't just be dark. I would be invisible. I turned away from the mirror. I couldn't look at it. It made me feel like I was already a ghost. I focused on the room. I needed to think like a security guard, not a victim. Assess the perimeter. Assess resources. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, Elias. Work the problem." I moved to Jerry's desk. Jerry was the shift supervisor. He was a big guy, ex-Navy, organized. He never left his post without logging it. I looked at his coffee mug. I touched the ceramic. It was stone cold. That stopped me. When I drove past the shack 40 minutes ago on my patrol, I had waved at him. I saw him lift this mug. The coffee had been steaming then. I touched the liquid. Ice cold. Not room temperature. Cold. Like it had been in a refrigerator for hours. But that was impossible. The timeline didn't fit. Unless time was working like the light, stuttering, breaking down. I opened the logbook lying on the desk. Jerry's handwriting was neat, all block capitals. 2200. Shift start. All clear. 2300. Perimeter check. Gate 4 secure. 0000. Rain heavy. Sensors tripping in Section B. False alarms. Then, the ink changed color. He had switched pens. The writing became jagged. Rushed. 0115. Static on comms. Loud. Can't clear it. 0145. Lights flickering in South Yard. Shadows moving wrong. And then, the last entry. It wasn't time-stamped. It was scrawled across the bottom of the page in heavy, gouging strokes, ripping the paper. The dark has weight. Don't let it in. I stared at the words. The dark has weight. I looked at the window above the desk. The guard shack was essentially a fishbowl, glass on all four sides so we could see the trucks coming in. Now, those windows were just squares of obsidian. I couldn't see out, but I felt exposed. Naked. If something was standing 2 inches on the other side of that glass, watching me, I wouldn't know until it broke through. I needed to cover the windows. I opened the desk drawers, searching frantically. Pens, paper clips, ketchup packets. Bottom drawer. Duct tape. Thank God for industrial maintenance. 3 rolls of silver duct tape and a stack of old, scheduled maintenance forms. I grabbed the tape. I started with the window facing the main gate, the direction the thing had come from. I tore a sheet of paper, held it against the glass, and ripped a strip of tape. ZZZZZT. The sound of the tape tearing seemed deafening in the small room. I froze, waiting for a reaction from outside. Silence. Just the low hum of the dying battery lights. I taped the paper up. It didn't cover much. I needed more. I used the logbook pages. I used old newspapers from the recycling bin. I worked frantically, covering every square inch of glass. My hands were shaking, fumbling with the sticky tape. Every time I pressed my hand against the glass to smooth the tape down, I expected to feel a hand press back from the other side. A cold, long-fingered hand matching mine. The temperature in the shack was dropping fast. I could see my breath now, little puffs of grey fog that vanished instantly. The space heater was dead without the main power. I finished the last window. The shack was now a box of paper and metal. It felt smaller, coffin-tight, but at least the black void wasn't staring at me any more. I sat back in Jerry's chair, the leather creaking loudly. Think, I said. Think. I had my tactical flashlight, battery unknown, maybe 80%. I had the heavy metal mag light, good as a club. I had my phone, 10% battery now. I had a pocket knife, a little 3-inch folding blade that seemed like a joke against whatever that stick figure thing was. And I had the keys to the facility. But the facility keys were useless if I couldn't get to the doors. I looked at the monitors on the wall again. They were all dead black screens. Except, I squinted. Monitor 2. The camera for the overflow lot, a section way in the back, filled with empty containers. The screen wasn't black. It was grey. I got up and put my face inches from the monitor. It was working, barely. The camera must have been on a different backup circuit, maybe solar. The image was terrible. Grainy, washing in and out of focus. It showed a narrow alleyway between two stacks of containers. And there was light there. Not a floodlight. A flare. Someone had popped a red emergency road flare. It was sputtering on the wet ground, casting a harsh, crimson radius. The light didn't go far, maybe 4 feet, but in that red circle I saw movement. There were people. 2 of them. Wearing high-vis vests. Dock workers. They were back to back, huddled in the red glow. One of them was holding a shovel. They were spinning, frantic, swinging the shovel at the edge of the light. I watched, mesmerized. The darkness around their little red bubble wasn't empty. It was roiling. Have you ever seen oil dropping into water? How it swirls and shapes itself. The darkness at the edge of their flare was moving like that. It was pressing in. And then I saw the limbs. Long, black, spindly things, like the legs of a spider crab, but the size of human arms. They reached out of the dark, testing the red light. When they touched the light, they recoiled, jerking back. Light hurts them, I thought. Or they hate it. The worker with the shovel swung at the limbs. I couldn't hear them screaming, but I could see their mouths open. They were terrified. The flare sputtered. It was dying. The red circle shrank. 5 feet. 4 feet. 3 feet. The limbs got bolder. They reached further in. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The flare gave one last bright pop, a flash of white magnesium, and then it died. The screen went black. I waited. I waited for another flare. I waited for movement. Nothing. Just static. I sank back into the chair. They were gone. Just like that. Swallowed. I looked at my flashlight sitting on the desk. My lifeline. If the darkness was a physical substance, if it had weight like Jerry wrote, then the flashlight wasn't just a tool for seeing. It was a shield. It was a weapon. But batteries die. Flares burn out. I needed a sustainable light source. Or I needed to get somewhere sealed. The main office. The main office building was a concrete blockhouse. It had the server rooms, the executive suites, and most importantly, the generator room was in the basement of that building. A massive industrial diesel generator. If it hadn't kicked on automatically, maybe it just needed a manual prime. Or a breaker reset. If I could get the floodlights back on, if I could flood the yard with 10 million lumens, maybe I could burn these things away. Or at least push them back enough to get to my truck and drive the hell out of there. But the main office was 300 yards away. 300 yards through the pitch black. Through the cold. Through the things that clicked and scraped. I checked my phone again. 9%. I needed to send a message. Not a text. Texts weren't going through. But maybe a draft. A note. Something. I opened the Notepad app and typed. Name, Elias Thorne. Location, Guard Shack. Time, 3:45 approximate. Status, lights out. Hostels in the dark. Light is physical. It stops at 6 feet. Do not go out without light. I saved it. Then a noise stopped me. It was a sound coming from inside the shack. A soft, rhythmic drip. 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 I froze. I scanned the ceiling. Was the roof leaking? It was raining outside, but the sound wasn't water hitting the floor. It was thicker, heavily fluid. Plop. I looked at the vent in the corner of the ceiling. The HVAC vent. A small metal grate, about 6 inches by 6 inches. A black substance was oozing through the slats of the grate. It looked like tar, or crude oil. It hung there, stretching, defying gravity for a second before detaching and hitting the linoleum floor. Plop! I shone my flashlight on it. When the beam hit the black puddle, the puddle hissed. It reacted. It shrank back, bubbling, trying to retreat from the light. It wasn't tar. It was them. Or it was the darkness itself, condensed into physical form. It was squeezing into the room. I scrambled backward, knocking the chair over. Crash! The noise was like a gunshot in the silence. Immediately, the scraping outside the shack returned. But this time, it was aggressive. Slam! Something hit the wall hard. The shack shook. The paper taped over the window rippled. Slam! They heard me. Slam! The glass behind the paper cracked. I heard the distinct spiderweb fracturing sound. Okay. They were trying to break in, and the stuff coming through the vent was dripping faster now, pooling, expanding. I couldn't stay here. The shack was a trap. I grabbed my backpack. I shoved the duct tape, the water bottle, and the extra batteries inside. I grabbed the mag light in my right hand and the tactical light in my left. I had to run. I had to make it to the main office. I looked at the door. Opening it meant inviting them in, but staying meant drowning in that black tar. I took a breath. A deep, shaking breath that tasted of ozone and fear. "Count of 3, I whispered. 3, 2. I unlocked the deadbolt. 1. I kicked the door open. The darkness rushed in like a dam breaking. It hit me like a physical wave of cold air. I clicked both flashlights on high. The beams crossed, creating a chaotic X of light in front of me. And there, standing right in the doorway, blocking my path, was one of them. It was tall, 7 feet, maybe more. Impossible thinness. It looked like a stick insect made of charred wood and wet obsidian. No eyes. Just a smooth, elongated head that tapered to a point, and where its mouth should be, there were just vertical slits, vibrating. It recoiled when the light hit it. It let out a sound, a high-pitched shriek that sounded like grinding metal. Scree! It threw a long, spindly arm up to shield its face. I didn't think. I swung the heavy mag light with every ounce of strength I had. Crack! I hit it in the midsection. It felt like hitting a bag of dry branches. The thing crumpled, stumbling back into the dark. I ran. I didn't look back. I sprinted into the void, swinging the lights wildly to create a path. Left foot grass. Right foot road. I ran toward the office. The cold was biting my face. The darkness felt thick, like running through waist-deep water. It dragged at my legs. And all around me, in the dark, I heard them waking up. Click, 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 click. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Dozens of them. I saw the outline of the office building ahead, a darker square against the black sky. "Come on," I wheezed. "Come on, Elias." I was 50 yards away when my tactical flashlight flickered. Once, twice, and then it died. I was down to one light. One beam, 6 feet of visibility, and something grabbed my ankle. I hit the ground hard. You know that sound when your body meets pavement? That wet, heavy slap? It knocked the wind out of me. The gravel dug into my palms, shredding the skin, but I didn't feel the sting yet. All I felt was the cold. Something had my left ankle. It didn't feel like a hand. It felt like a coil of wet rope, cold, slick, and incredibly strong. It wasn't pulling me back. It was anchoring me. I kicked out with my right boot. I thrashed like a drowning man. My heel connected with something solid, something that felt like dried wood and cartilage. Crack. A sound like snapping a dry branch. The grip on my ankle loosened for a microsecond. I rolled onto my back, gasping, and swung the mag light wildly. The beam cut through the black soup, a frantic strobe light. Flash. Asphalt. Flash. My own boots. Flash. The face. It was right on top of me. I saw it for less than a second, but I can still draw it for you. It was pale. Not white like skin, but white like a blind cave fish. Translucent. I could see dark veins pulsing underneath the surface. It didn't have a nose. Just two raw, vertical slits that flared open. And the mouth. The mouth was a perfect circle, lined with rows of small, inward-facing needles. It hissed, a sound like high-pressure steam escaping a vent. It hated the light. I didn't swing the flashlight like a club this time. I shoved it forward like a spear. I jammed the lens of the maglite right into that pale, eyeless face. Scree! The noise it made wasn't biological. It sounded like metal shearing. The creature convulsed. Where the light touched its skin, the flesh blistered and smoked, turning black and flaking away like burning paper. It let go of my leg. I didn't wait to see if it recovered. I scrambled backward, crab-walking on the wet asphalt, kicking blindly until I could get my feet under me. Get up! I screamed at myself. Move! I turned and sprinted. I had one flashlight left. The beam was shaking so bad I could barely see the ground. The darkness felt heavier now. It wasn't just an absence of light anymore. It was resisting me. Every step felt like running through waist-deep water. The air was thick, viscous. It clogged my nose. It tasted metallic. Ahead, the main office loomed. A brutalist block of concrete, darker than the sky. I could hear them behind me. The clicking, the scraping, a chorus of it. There wasn't just one anymore. They were swarming. Click, 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 click. They were fast. Faster than me. But they were cautious. They were testing the edge of my light, waiting for the beam to falter. I reached the concrete stairs of the entrance. I stumbled, cracking my shin on the step, but adrenaline pushed me up. The front doors were glass, heavy, reinforced safety glass. But they were sliding automatic doors. They needed power to open. No, 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 I panted. I slammed my shoulder into the glass. It didn't budge. I aimed the flashlight through the glass. The lobby inside was pitch black. I fumbled for my keycard. My hands were slick with rain and blood. I dropped the card. Clatter. Please, I whimpered. I dropped to my knees, patting the ground. The skittering noise was right at the bottom of the stairs. I could hear the wet breathing. Whew! My fingers found the plastic card. I snatched it up. I jammed it against the reader on the wall. The reader was dark. No LED. No beep. Come on! I yelled. I pressed it again. Nothing. The backup battery for the door system must have drained, or the surge killed it. I spun around, putting my back to the glass. I held the flashlight out like a weapon. They were at the bottom of the stairs. 3 of them. I could see their silhouettes against the slightly less black asphalt. Tall, twitching, waiting. I couldn't stay here. I was cornered. Then I remembered the side door. The employee entrance. It was a manual steel door with a standard key lock. It was around the corner, down the alleyway between the building and the generator housing. But that alleyway was narrow. It was a choke point. I didn't have a choice. I took a breath, gripped the flashlight, and ran. I rounded the corner of the building. The alley was tight, maybe 6 feet wide. The darkness here was suffocating. The walls seemed to press in. I ran with my hand trailing along the brick wall, feeling for the door handle. Rough brick, rough brick, rough brick. Metal. I stopped. I found the handle. I jammed my master key into the lock. It stuck. It always stuck. You had to jiggle it. "Come on, you piece of junk," I hissed. I heard the click 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 entering the alley behind me. They were funneling in. I jiggled the key. CK chunk. The lock turned. I threw the door open, dove inside, and slammed it shut behind me. I turned the deadbolt. Thud. I backed away, aiming the light at the door. Bam! Something hit the steel from the outside. The door rattled in its frame. Bam! Then a long, slow scrape. Nails dragging down the metal, like they were testing the material. Then silence. I was inside. I lowered the flashlight. The beam hit the floor. Gray industrial carpet. The silence inside the office building was different. Outside, the silence was heavy, wet, expectant. Inside, it was dead. It was the silence of a tomb. The air was dry, stale. It smelled of toner cartridge dust and old coffee. I was in the rear hallway that led to the break room and the mailroom. I checked my body. My uniform pants were torn at the knee. My left ankle was throbbing, a deep, rhythmic ache. I pulled up my pant leg. In the stark white circle of the flashlight, my skin looked wrong. Where the thing had grabbed me, there wasn't a bruise. There was a handprint, but it was gray. The color had been sucked out of my skin in the shape of those long fingers. And it was cold. Burning cold. I touched it. It felt numb, like I'd had a shot of Novocaine. "Focus," I whispered. "Generator." The generator room access was in the basement. I needed to get to the central lobby, then take the stairwell down. I started walking. The main office was a maze of cubicles. In the dark, it was a nightmare landscape. I walked past the rows of desks. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, but the radius effect was worse inside. Maybe because there was no moisture in the air to scatter the light. I don't know. The beam stopped at 4 feet now. I felt like I was walking inside a diving bell at the bottom of the ocean. I passed a desk. A family photo frame was face down. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a paper plate, the bread curled and dry. It felt like everyone had just evaporated. I reached the main lobby. It was a cavernous space with a high atrium ceiling. Normally, sunlight would pour in from the skylights. Now, looking up was like looking into an abyss. I couldn't see the ceiling. I couldn't see the skylights. Just upward darkness. I felt small, exposed. I swept the light across the reception desk. "Is anyone here?" I called out. My voice echoed. "Here, here, here." Then a sound, a soft ding, like an elevator arrival chime. I spun toward the elevator bank on the far wall. The elevators should be dead. No power. I walked toward them, slow, heel to toe. The display above the middle elevator wasn't lit. The doors were closed. But I heard it again. Ding. It wasn't coming from the electronics. It was coming from inside the shaft. A mechanical sound. Metal hitting metal. I pressed my ear against the elevator doors. I heard movement. Scrambling. Not the mechanical whir of the cab moving, but the sound of things climbing the cables. Hundreds of claws on tension wire. Scritch, 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 scritch. They were in the building. They were using the shafts. I backed away. The basement. I had to get to the basement before they climbed out on this floor. The stairwell door was to the right of the elevators. I pushed through it. Concrete stairs. Steel railings. The air here was cooler. Damp. I started to descend. Step. 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 I counted the floors. Ground. B1. B2. The generator was on B2. As I went down, the air pressure changed. My ears popped. The darkness felt. Lighter? No, not lighter. Thinner. I reached the B2 landing. A heavy fire door with a push bar. I pushed it open. The smell hit me instantly. Diesel fuel. Grease. And something else. Something rotten. I stepped into the generator room. It was a massive space, dominated by the yellow Caterpillar industrial generator, size of a semi-truck engine. I swept the light around. The control panel was on the side. I rushed to it. I checked the gauges. Fuel. Full. Oil pressure. 0. Battery voltage. Low. But not dead. Why didn't it start? It was set to auto. It should have kicked on the second the grid failed. I looked at the error display. It was a digital screen, barely illuminated. Error code 404. Sensor obstruction. Sensor obstruction? I moved to the air intake, a massive vent on the wall that fed oxygen to the engine. I shined my light into the grate. It was clogged. Not with debris. Not with leaves. It was clogged with a substance. It looked like grey webbing. Thick, dusty strands of silk, packed tight into the vent. I reached out to pull it away. I had my work gloves on. I grabbed a handful of the webbing. It was sticky. Stronger than steel wool. I pulled hard. It tore with a wet ripping sound, and something fell out of the web. It hit the floor with a wet thud. I aimed my light down. It was a hard hat. A yellow distinct logistics hard hat. I knew that hat. It had a sticker on the side. Veteran. It was Jerry's hat. I stared at it. Jerry had been in the guard shack. How did his hat get into the basement air intake of the main building? Unless he was here first. I looked back at the web in the vent. Deep inside, behind the blockage, I saw something pale. A hand. Human. It was wrapped in the grey silk, pinned against the louvers. Jerry! I whispered. The hand twitched. I scrambled back, dropping the webbing. Jerry! A voice came from the vent. But it wasn't Jerry's voice. It sounded like Jerry, but wrong. Like his voice was being played back on a tape recorder that was running too slow. The light hurts. Elias. I froze. Turn it off. I stepped back. Jerry, I'm going to get you out. I just need to start the generator. No. The voice gargled. The noise draws them. The light reveals us. Reveals who? Jerry? Who is us? There was a pause. A long, sickening silence. And then, from the dark corners of the generator room, behind the massive engine block, in the shadows where my light couldn't reach, I heard movement. Big movement. Heavy. And the voice from the vent changed. It lost the human cadence entirely. It became a mimicry. Elias. 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 It was laughing. I looked at the generator. I looked at the manual start lever. If I pulled that lever, this machine would roar to life. It would make 120 decibels of noise. It would shake the foundation. And if the alternator worked, it would flood the building with light. But Jerry said the noise draws them. And I wasn't alone in the room. I saw eyes. Not the eyeless face of the stick figure things. Real eyes. Reflective. Like a cat's. But way too big. And they were 8 feet off the ground. There were 2 yellow orbs glowing in the dark behind the generator. Then 2 more appeared next to them. Then 2 more. Something massive was perched on top of the fuel tank. I gripped the start lever. My choice was simple. Silence and darkness, and whatever that spider thing was. Or noise and light, and praying the machine didn't kill me. I looked at the eyes. They blinked. I pulled the lever. The world didn't just get loud. It shattered. When that diesel engine caught, it wasn't a sound. It was a concussion. Boom, chug, 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 roar. 12 cylinders of industrial power firing in a concrete box. I felt it in my fillings. I felt it in the marrow of my shin bones. The air pressure in the room spiked instantly, slamming against my eardrums. And then the breakers tripped. Not off. On. Clack, 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 clack. A cascade of relays firing across the wall. And the lights fought back. The overhead fluorescent tubes in the generator room didn't just flicker on. They screamed to life. They buzzed with a violence I've never heard from electricity before. And I saw the radius effect in real time. It looked like an explosion in slow motion. The bulbs flared white-hot, blindingly bright. And from those tubes, the light erupted. It pushed the darkness back like a physical force. I actually saw the black air ripple, like heat haze off a highway. The light expanded 2 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet. It carved out a sphere of visibility around the engine, and it hit the thing on the fuel tank. For a second, just one clear high-definition second, I saw what was sharing the room with me. It wasn't a spider. I wish it had been a spider. It was a knot. A tangled, wet knot of human limbs. Arms. Legs. Torsos. All fused together into a central, heaving mass of pale, translucent flesh. And from the center of that knot, those massive, yellow, cat-like eyes were staring at me. It was a scavenger. A collector. It was made of the people it had taken. When the high-voltage light hit it, the creature didn't just recoil. It boiled. Steam erupted from its skin. The translucent flesh turned instant charcoal black, blistering and popping. It shrieked. Even over the roar of the generator, I heard that sound. 1,000 voices screaming in unison. Scree! It thrashed, knocking a heavy toolbox off the tank. Clang! It scrambled backward, trying to find a shadow. But the generator room was small, and the lights were everywhere. It was burning alive in the photons. It lunged, not at me, but at the vent. The air intake where Jerry was. It squeezed itself through the metal grate with a sickening crunch of breaking bones, liquefying its own mass to escape the light. It vanished into the ductwork, leaving a trail of black, smoking sludge on the wall. I was alone with the machine. The noise was unbearable. I covered my ears, screaming, but I couldn't hear myself. I had to get out. The generator was running, but for how long? The temperature in the room was rising fast. The exhaust fans were kicking on, but the air felt charged, electric. I stumbled back to the door. I looked at the vent one last time. "I'm sorry, Jerry," I mouthed. I couldn't save him. He was part of the wall now, part of the web. I pushed through the fire door and into the stairwell. The difference was immediate. The generator noise was muffled here, but the vibration was still shaking the handrails, and the lights in the stairwell were struggling. They were on emergency circuits. They flickered. Buzz. Dark. Buzz. Light. And because of the radius, the stairwell looked like a zebra crossing. Bands of bright light near the fixtures, and bands of total, suffocating blackness in between. I had to climb through the stripes. Step. Light. Step. Dark. Step. Light. I reached the B1 landing. I heard the sound again. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was coming from the elevator shaft next to the stairs. But now, it was frantic. The generator noise wasn't just deafening me. It was a dinner bell, a seismic signal. Every single thing in the dark that hunted by sound was converging on this building. I had turned the main office into the loudest thing in the city. I ran up the stairs. My ankle screamed with every step, but the pain was distant, dull. Ground floor. The lobby. I kicked the stairwell door open and froze. The lobby lights had engaged. The high chandeliers, the reception spots, they were all firing. It was a cathedral of light. But the light couldn't reach the floor in the center. The ceiling was 30 feet high. The light pushed down about 15 feet and then stopped. It formed a glowing ceiling, a false sky of white light above. Below it, the floor was a shadow realm, and the floor was moving. They were pouring out of the elevator doors. The doors had been pried open from the inside. Dozens of them. The stick figure things. They were flowing over the reception desk, knocking over chairs, swarming toward the source of the vibration, the basement stairs, where I was standing. They didn't see me yet. They were blind, remember? They hunted by sound. And the floor was vibrating so hard from the generator that they were confused. They were snapping at the air, snapping at each other. I slowly backed into the stairwell. Click. My belt buckle hit the metal door frame. 50 heads snapped in my direction. The slits where their faces should be flared open. They hissed. I slammed the door shut. Bang. A split second later, the other side of the door erupted with impacts. Thud, 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 thud. They were throwing themselves against the steel. The metal groaned. The handle rattled violently. I locked the deadbolt. My fingers were slipping on the metal. Thud. The door bowed inward. Just a fraction. But enough. They were coming through. I couldn't go back down to the basement. I couldn't go into the lobby. Up, I gasped. Go up. I turned and ran up the stairs. 2nd floor. Executive suites. 3rd floor. IT and server rooms. 4th floor. Roof access. I took the stairs 2 at a time, hauling myself up by the railing. My lungs were burning. The air in the stairwell was getting hotter. The generator was overworking the electrical grid. I could smell the wiring inside the walls melting. Plastic and copper. Behind me, down on the ground floor landing, I heard the crash of the door giving way. Crash. Then the sound of a stampede on metal stairs. Clang, 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 clang. They were fast climbers. I reached the 4th floor landing. The roof access door. It was a heavy, industrial steel door with a push bar. I hit the bar. It didn't move. No, I sobbed. No, no, no. Locked. From the outside. Or jammed. I threw my shoulder against it. Solid as a bank vault. The sound of the stampede was on the second floor now. Clang, clang, clang. I aimed my flashlight at the door frame. No keyhole. It was an electronic maglock. The power was on. The magnet was engaged. It was sealed tight because of the security lockdown. Release. I screamed at the keypad. Open. I smashed the keypad with the butt of the flashlight. Plastic shattered. Sparks flew. The door stayed shut. I was trapped. The skittering was on the third floor. I could hear their breathing now. That wet, ruttling wheeze. I looked around the landing. Concrete walls. Steel stairs. Nowhere to hide. Wait. Above the door. The transom window. It was small. Rectangular. Wire-reinforced glass. Maybe 18 inches high. I stepped back. I aimed the mag light. I threw the flashlight as hard as I could. Smash! The heavy metal light crashed through the glass, taking the wire mesh with it. It landed on the roof outside. I was now in total darkness, except for the faint glow coming up the stairwell from the floors below. I scrambled up the railing, putting my feet on the door handle. I grabbed the jagged metal frame of the broken window. Glass sliced into my palms. I didn't care. I pulled. I chinned the ledge. I kicked against the door. Below me, the third-floor door flew open. They poured onto the landing. I didn't look down. I hauled myself through the broken window. My belt caught. I tore it loose. My shirt ripped. I tumbled forward, falling onto the gravel surface of the roof. I rolled, scrambling to my feet, and spun around. A pale, long hand shot through the broken window, grasping at the air where my leg had been a second ago. I stomped on it. I brought my heavy work boot down on the fingers. Crunch. It shrieked and withdrew. I looked for something, anything, to block the hole. A ventilation unit sat nearby. Loose bricks from a repair job. I grabbed a brick. I jammed it into the window frame. I grabbed another. I piled them up, blocking the opening. Then I backed away. I was on the roof. I stood up straight, gasping, wiping blood and sweat from my eyes. The wind was blowing up here. It was freezing cold, and for the first time in hours, I could see further than 10 feet. The roof of the distinct logistics building was lined with floodlights. They were on. They were blazing. The generator was powering the perimeter array. But the light was wrong. Normally, these lights would illuminate the parking lot, the highway, the forest beyond. Now, they created a dome. I walked to the edge of the roof and looked over the parapet. The building was encased in a hemisphere of glowing orange light. It extended maybe 50 feet out from the walls. Inside that bubble, the rain was falling normally. I could see the asphalt. I could see the tops of the trees near the entrance. But beyond that 50 feet, a wall, a solid, vertical wall of blackness. The light didn't fade into the distance. It hit the radius limit and stopped dead. It looked like the building was inside a snow globe that had been painted black on the outside, and against that black wall. They were waiting. I saw them. Hundreds of them. They were clinging to the edge of the darkness, just millimeters from the light. They were pacing, watching, and they were looking up. At me. The generator chugged beneath my feet, vibrating the roof. It was the heartbeat of this little bubble of reality. I looked at the fuel gauge on the rooftop vent. Diesel level, 15%. 15%. Maybe 2 hours of fuel. Maybe less. And when that engine stopped, the bubble would pop. I sank to my knees on the gravel. I looked at the city skyline, or where it should be. There was nothing. No other domes of light. No distant glow. Just the void. And then I saw it. Far to the north. Miles away. A single, thin beam of blue light. It was shooting straight up into the air. A laser? A beacon? It pierced the darkness, going up and up until it vanished into the black ceiling of the sky. It was pulsing. Blink, blink, blink. Morse code. I know Morse. Jerry taught me. I stared at the blue pulse. Sanctuary. I looked at the horde of monsters waiting at the edge of my light. I looked at the dying fuel gauge. I looked at that distant blue light. I had to get there. But to get there, I had to cross 4 miles of the radius. I stood up. I reached into my pocket. My phone. 5%. I opened the recorder again. If anyone can hear this, I rasped. My name is Elias. I'm at Distinct Logistics. The generator is running, but it's going to die. There is a light in the north. A blue signal. I'm going to make a run for it. I looked at the mag light lying on the gravel where I'd thrown it. The lens was cracked, but it was still shining. I picked it up. It's not just the dark, I whispered into the phone. It's what's in it. And they are hungry. I turned off the recording. I walked to the fire escape ladder on the north side of the building. I looked down into the abyss. Okay, I said. Let's go. The hardest part wasn't climbing down the fire escape. It wasn't the pain in my ankle, or the freezing wind. The hardest part was walking to the edge of the light, and stepping past it. The generator was still roaring behind me, casting that 50-foot dome of safety. Inside that dome, I was real. I was solid. But the moment I crossed that invisible line into the radius, I felt my soul stretch. It's a physical sensation, like diving into deep water. The air pressure slams against your chest. The sound of your own breathing gets stuffed back down your throat. I had the cracked mag light. It was my only weapon. I didn't turn it on yet. I didn't want to be a beacon. I wanted to be a shadow. I moved toward the north fence line. The blue light was pulsing in the distance. Blink, blink, blink. 4 miles. I climbed the chain-link fence. My hands were numb, but I hauled myself over, dropping into the ditch on the other side. I landed in mud. Cold, freezing mud. I lay there for a second, listening. Back at the warehouse, the generator was chugging. It was a dying beast. I could hear the RPMs fluctuating. Vroom, cough, vroom. And around the perimeter of the warehouse light, I saw them, the silhouette of the horde. Hundreds of them. They were pacing the edge of the light, waiting for the engine to fail. They knew. They had patience. I turned my back on them and started walking north. I walked in the dark. I didn't use the light. I used the pavement of the old county road as my guide. I shuffled, feeling the texture change under my boots. If it got soft, I was veering off. If it stayed hard, I was on the road. 1 mile. The silence out here was absolute. No wind. No animals. Just the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. 2 miles. My phone vibrated. A ghost notification. 2% battery. I didn't look at it. The light from the screen would be like a flare gun. Then, behind me, the sound changed. The roaring of the generator stopped. It didn't sputter. It just cut. The silence that followed was violent. It hit the valley like a hammer. And then, the scream. It came from the warehouse. A collective, shrieking roar of triumph. The sound of hundreds of things flooding into the space where the light used to be. I stopped walking. I couldn't help it. I turned around. The orange glow was gone. The warehouse was just another part of the void. But I heard them moving. And they weren't staying at the warehouse. They were spreading out. They were hunting the ripples. And I was a ripple. I started to run. Stealth was over. I clicked the mag light on. The beam was pathetic. The lens was cracked, so the light was fractured, casting weird, jagged shadows. It cut a 6-foot tunnel in front of me. Run. Light. Run. Dark. I could hear them behind me. They were faster than me. Click, 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 click. They were closing the gap. 3 miles. The blue beacon was closer now. I could see the source. It was a hill. A large, residential property on a hill, surrounded by a high wall. The blue light was coming from a tower on the roof. "Hey!" I screamed. "Help me!" My voice died in the heavy air. I felt the ground shake. Something big was running behind the stick figures. The knot thing. The scavenger. I could hear its wet, heavy footfalls. Thump. Thump. I reached the bottom of the hill. The road curved up. My flashlight flickered. "No," I begged. "Not now." It flickered again. Yellow. Dim. Click, click. They were right behind me. I could smell them. Ozone and copper. I felt a cold wind on my neck. A claw brushed my backpack, slicing the fabric. I spun around, swinging the dying light. There were 3 of them. Right there. Tall, pale, mouths open, ready to feed. I backed up, tripping over my own feet. I fell onto the asphalt. The mag light rolled away. The lens shattered completely. The bulb died. I was in the dark. I curled into a ball. I covered my head. I waited for the teeth. I waited for the cold fingers to pull me apart. I heard them hiss. I felt their breath. And then the sun came out. Not the real sun. A spotlight. From the top of the hill, a massive, focused beam of pure white LED light slammed into the road. It was blinding. It was physical. It hit the creatures standing over me. Scree! They didn't just burn. They exploded. The light was so intense it vaporized the moisture in their skin instantly. They shrieked and scrambled back into the shadows, leaving smoking piles of ash on the road. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Clear. Distorted by amplification, but human. "Run. Up. The hill." I didn't ask questions. I scrambled up. I ran up that beam of light like it was a solid bridge. I sprinted up the driveway. The light stayed on me, burning away the darkness, burning away the cold. I reached the gate. A heavy iron gate reinforced with steel plates. It buzzed and swung open just enough for me to slip through. I dove inside. The gate slammed shut. Clang. I collapsed on the driveway. I looked up. I was in a courtyard. And it was beautiful. There were solar arrays everywhere. Battery banks the size of refrigerators. And lights. So many lights. UV lamps, grow lights, floodlights. They were arranged in overlapping fields of fire. There were no shadows here. A man walked toward me. He was wearing welding goggles and a heavy coat. He held a rifle, but it had a high-powered flashlight taped to the barrel. He looked down at me. He didn't smile. He just nodded. "Welcome to the radius," he said. "Check your shoes. You tracked darkness in." I looked at my boots. Clinging to the soles, there was a thin layer of that black tar. It was sizzling on the concrete, evaporating under the UV lights. I kicked it off. "Who are you?" I gasped. "We're the lighthouse," he said. "We saw your truck lights die. We've been watching you for 3 hours." He reached down and pulled me up. His grip was warm. "Human. Come inside," he said. "We have coffee. And we have walls." Shift in tone. The narrator is now leaning back, speaking to the audience. "That was 4 days ago. I'm still here. There are 12 of us. We have solar. We have batteries. We have a perimeter. But we know the truth now. The sun isn't coming back. The physics of the world have changed. The light we make is the only light there is. We watch the monitors. We see the city below us. It's entirely black now. But sometimes, in the deep dark, we see little sparks. Someone lighting a match. Someone turning on a phone screen. We mark the coordinates. We send the blue signal. SANCTUARY. We try to guide them in. Most of them don't make it. But if you're listening to this, if you can hear my voice, don't lose your light. Hoard your batteries. Cover your windows. Stay quiet. And if you see a blue pulse in the north, run. Run like hell, because the dark has weight, and it's getting heavier every day. This is Elias, signing off.